Okay. Shalom. Thank you for B'Reshut Rabbanim. Nice to be here. Just wanted to maybe give a brief Devar Torah. Of course, coming up we have Rosh Hashanah. One of the main features of the Tefillah of Rosh Hashanah, the Piyutim that were composed to be said in the Tefillot of Rosh Hashanah. So these Piyutim come from, of course, our major Paitanim, Paitanes Sefarad, the poets, the composers from the golden age of Spain, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, Shlomo Ibn Gabirol. So that's where most of our Piyutim come from, and they made their way into, I think, almost exclusively, entirely into the Sephardic liturgy. And if you open up the Sephardic Machzor, so you'll find a difference. So then some Machzorim, you'll find some of the Piyutim, they're found inside. Some of them are said before Nishmat, and then some of them are said before the Birkot Kriyat Shema, after Yishtabach, but before the Birkot Kriyat Shema, before Yikadal. But then you open up some other Sephardic Machzorim, particularly the ones lately that are printed now in the Eretz Yisrael, and you'll find that all of these Piyutim, they've been put to the back, after the Chazarat Amidah. So they put all the Piyutim in the back. So what is that all about? What's the question? Yeah, if you find our Machzor, the Machzor that my father prepared for our Keilah, puts the Piyutim in the place, before Nishmat, you have Shofek Kol Haaretz, and then before the Birkot Kriyat Shema, so you have Yidei Hashim and Hashem Shimcha Rumicha. So you have Piyutim that are in the proper place. So it goes back to halakha. It's actually starting with the Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us that you're not allowed to interrupt unnecessarily in the middle of the Birkot Kriyat Shema. The Mishnah talks about a case where it says that the statement is Shoel mipnei ha'yirav umeshiv mipnei ha'kavod, which means that you're allowed to interrupt voluntarily, meaning to say you're allowed to go up to someone and greet him if you're afraid that by not greeting him you're going to put yourself in danger. The example that's given is that, let's say one of the king's legions happens to pop into the synagogue at the moment that you're saying Kriyat Shema. So by not going over to greet them, then they're going to take it as an affront, and therefore they're going to put the Keilah in danger. So to actually go up to them and interrupt the Kriyat Shema and greet them is permitted voluntarily. And then it says Meshib mipnei hakavod, but to answer is a little bit more relaxed, meaning to say that so not relaxed, it's a little more restrictive. Which means that if it's not a matter of yirah, that you're worried that you're going to be put in danger, but it's simply a matter of kavod, that you're not giving kavod to somebody. A king comes, you're not worried that he's going to do anything to you if you don't greet him. But if he comes to greet you and you don't greet him, then that's like an affront to his kavod. So if he comes to you, or if a very important person comes to you in the middle of the Kriyat Shema and says hello, so you're meshib mipnei hakavod, you're allowed to answer him mipnei hakavod. But barring that, anything short of that, so you're not allowed to interrupt during the Birkot Kriyat Shema. The poskim just extend that restriction not just to the Birkot Kriyat Shema, but even into the section of the Zemirot. We know that the Zemirot is like sandwiched between two berachot. You have the Baruch She'amar, which starts off the section of the Zemirot, and it all the way at the end is the Beracha V'Yishtabach. They're both actual berachot. And those berachot are considered Samuch Lechaverta, which means they're connected to each other. So in order to preserve that connection, so you can't just say Baruch She'amar, say some Zemirot, and then start talking to your friend, and then come back. It severs the connection between the two berachot. So for that reason, they say you're not the same restrictions that apply for Birkot Kriyat Shema also apply to Zemirot as well. So long story short, these Piyutim, there's a good indication that the actual Piyutim were composed specifically to be said in their place. So for example, Yashimcha Robimcha, the refrain for that Piyut is Yishtabak ve'itbar ve'it. That was composed specifically as a reshut, as an introduction to the Kaddish, right? That's because that's what we say. Yishtabak ve'itbar ve'it. So it was composed specifically for that place. The Rambam wrote a teshuvah that was discovered, many years later, recently within the last 100 years, where people asked him, is it appropriate to interrupt with these piyutim? Apparently, in the time of the Rambam, this was a very, very common practice. Yehuda Levi, Shalom Ibn Gavirol lived before the Rambam, so this was a common practice to put piyutim. And he was asked, is it appropriate? And he answered no. He said that it's not appropriate to add the piyutim in the middle of the tefillah. So if you're going to do it, you should put the piyutim before, say them before Baruch She'amar. Like we say, Ha'aderet V'Amunah, we do before Baruch She'amar. But we should not put them inside the tefillah. The Rashbar, Shlomo ben Adret, who lived 3 generations after the Rambam in Christian Spain, also had a teshuvah, and he also said, listen, if it were up to me, I would do without it. I would put the piyutim either before Baruch She'amar or after the Amidah. But because it's such a widespread minhag, he says, Hanach lahem leYisrael. Says, let the keilot be, leave them alone, because they have what to rely on. So this machloket really kind of raged really throughout the ages, and kind of resurfaced after the 16th century, when you had really more of an influence of the Mekubalim. The Mekubalim had very, very strong emphasis on the fact that the tefillot, or every single word, they weighed very heavily on every single word. Not only every single word, but every single word in its proper place, and that you shouldn't interrupt the words. I mean, the tefillot really, according to the Mekubalim, each word ascends to Shamayim, and it's supposed to have a certain order. So for that reason, the Mekubalim were very makpid not to, interrupt the tefillah for the piyutim. So this debate raged, continued to rage throughout the Sephardic world. The poskim that leaned toward Kabbalah said that we really should not be saying the piyutim in the middle of the tefillah. The ones that lead again, not so kabbalistically inclined, said that there's no problem with it. We have a long history of having the piyutim said in the middle of the tefillah. One person to mention is the Chida, Rav Chaim Yosef David Azulai. If you want to know, I think the Chida, if you ask me, is like one of the most fascinating characters in all of Sephardic Torah. The reason being is because he lived at a crossroads where he had so many different. He had a Kabbalistic influence. He learned in the famous yeshiva Bet El, was a yeshiva for Mekubalim in Eretz Yisrael over the last couple hundred years. He himself was from a family from Morocco. He was the descendant, the great grandson of Avraham Azulai, who was a great rabbi who lived in Morocco. His mother's family was Ashkenaz. One of his primary rabbanim was Rav Yonan Avon, the author of Nachbe Bakesef, who was more of a Ladino, from the Ladino-speaking Ottoman Sephardic community. One of his other rabbanim was Rav Yitzchak HaKohen Rappaport, who was really the only Ashkenazic rabbi who served as the Rishon LeZion. He apparently was a very big rabbi. The yishuv in Eretz Yisrael, the old yishuv, was dominantly Sephardic, almost exclusively Sephardic, only until the beginning of the 19th century, when some of the Ashkenazim started coming over. So Rav Yitzchak HaKohen Rappaport, he was the author of Sefer Batei Kenesiyot. So his family was Ashkenaz, but he was such a big rabbi, he lived in Izmir and then eventually made his way to Yerushalayim, that they appointed him as Rishon LeZion. But he himself was Ashkenaz, and he was one of the Chida's main rabbanim. So the Chida really kind of lived at a crossroads in his own life. So you really want to know, you have a conflict between Kabbalah and between Halakha, or between Ashkenazic minhag and Sephardic minhag. Look at the Chida and see what he says. It's very telling to see. And he does. He talks about this issue in Sefer Tuv Ayin, and he leans towards the Mikubal camp. He said, really we should not insert the Piyutim in the middle of the the tefillah. And even to this day, the debate continues to rage. Rabbi Yossi Azose was of the opinion that we should not put the Piyutim in the middle of tefillah. Rav Shalom Eshash, who was a famous Moroccan posek of the last generation, said that no, we have to rely on, we should leave it where it is. Many Moroccans have the minhag to keep the Piyutim where they are. This debate really continues. So, today, that's why I started out by saying that in Israel, it was all the Mazurim coming out of Israel lean more towards that influence. The Rabbanim who lived in Israel, the Rabbanim, the Bavliim, the Iraqi rabbis that are more like have more deference towards the Kabbalah and say, okay, let's not put the Piyutim in the middle of Tefillah, let's leave them till after the Amidah. So it's still an issue that's left unresolved, and each Keilah has their minhag.
Chazak Baruch.
Wow. We're doing.